Okay, I didn't get an opportunity to do one of these last week because my voice decided to go haywire on me with my sinus problems or whatever it was. I had a really squeaky voice. But I didn't feel like I had chills or fever or anything like that. But anyway, I had pulled up this article that somebody had sent to me, and it got me to thinking about the fact that although this is coming from the UK, I still have some sinus problems going on, as you can obviously tell. That the way that the 12 steps is done and the way that the entire 12-step thing is handled, it kind of gives me the uncanny. It's almost creepy to realize that people from around the world, I've encountered people not in person but online, from the UK, from Australia, from Ireland, from Scotland, from all regions of the United States and Canada, and they all report the same kind of 12-step dogmatic crap that goes on everywhere, the same creepy old-timers, the same weirdo hierarchy that runs the meetings, the same shitty rehabs, the same exploitation of newcomers, the same everything. It's like the religious cult, no matter where you put it, is the same type of creepy, exploitative, abhorrent, I was trying to find a better word, organization the world over. But anyway, this goes on to say, he begins with how he's in the UK and he checked into a rehab, and he said that when he was in the treatment center, as he was coming in, a counselor said, "Can anyone name any methods for addiction other than the 12 steps?" And I'm not going to read it line for line. I'll post a link to the article. I'll just glean the parts I highlighted, and then I'll put it in the video description, and you can read it if you want to. But it's the title of the article is about, "I was told the 12 steps would cure my addiction. Why did I end up feeling more broken?" Yeah, I can definitely go along with him there, you know. I think a lot of us out here could go along with that. You went into rehab, you went into the AA meetings thinking that this was finally going to cure you, and it turned out to making you worse than you were before you got in. But he's saying that when he got there, this treatment center counselor said, "Can anyone think of anything better than the 12 steps?" A patient said cognitive behavioral therapy, and the counselor said, "Those are methods that just come and go, but it's only the 12 steps that truly work." Don't you love it how these old-timers, these gurus, these 12-step counselors and all the rest of them, they make these broad, grand, sweeping generalizations about how everything must be and everything, how it really works, as though it cannot be questioned, it cannot be argued with, it cannot be debated. It's just, I said that. It's true. It's true for everybody, everywhere, all over the world, in any kind of place at any given time. Only the 12 steps work. I can only know this because I said it, even though I don't have no way of proving it, but I said it, so it's true. It's smug arrogance. But of course, I bet this counselor says they practice humility. But he goes on to say he found that to be questionable. 28 days he stayed in a 12-step rehab for substance abuse, and then he says is outlined by a series of moments which later on told him there were things that just weren't right, but he wasn't in a place to argue. That happens with a lot of people, and myself included. You go into rehab, or even worse, you're court-ordered in there, and you know you can be remanded back to jail if you say anything out of line, and you're just not in a place to argue with these people when they're making these kind of statements. It's another reason why I believe that a lot of 12-step counselors are bullies, because I've seen them in those 12-step rehab centers treating people like shit, talking to people like garbage, and they know they can get away with it. Nothing's going to happen to them. They wouldn't do that to you on the street when they knew somebody might, tell you to fuck off or I'll punch you in the face or something like that. But when you're helpless and you're in there and you're at the mercy of the legal system or the medical system or whatever else is going on, you're in no place to argue with these people, and they can treat you however they like. On check-in, he says he was told he had a disease that was progressive, fatal, and incurable, and they had a 1 in 3 chance of dying from it. Which, to be honest, I've heard that too. You have a 1 in 3 chance of dying of this disease. There was one meeting I used to go to where they would say, you're either going to die with the disease or you're going to die from the disease. Oh, that's so profound. They're saying you're either going to kill yourself drinking or you're going to die with your alcoholism in remission. Bunch of bullshit, but it's another way to make you more dependent upon them. By making it sound like, this is such a grave, serious thing, which they don't believe, by the way. He goes on here to go into a little bit of background about himself and how he wound up there, but he says, I asked at check-in if I could have a Quran to go with a Bible next to my bed. I had a crush on a Muslim boy, but was told in no uncertain terms the Bible was enough to be getting on with. That's a little surprising for me in the UK, all things considered. I mean, I've never been to the UK, so I can't judge, but I went to rehab in one place in the Bible Belt, and I had brought a bunch of books with me. They were just fiction books, and the first thing the counselor said is, "I guess you brought a Bible in here. Everybody gets religious when they know they're going to go to jail for a very long time." And I said, "No, I didn't bring a Bible because I don't believe in it." And they said, "Well, all these books you got," and they just started throwing the paperbacks into this closet thing. They said, "They're going to stay here until you leave. The only thing you're going to read here is the big book." That's the way it was, the rehab I went to. And that was in the Bible Belt where everybody, waves their hands in the air and praises Jesus on the TV and ads every other day. But it's, I can see them doing something like this, but I'm a little bit surprised he was able to even get a Bible in there, although I wouldn't recommend reading it either. Group therapy was the same. We were told we were powerless over our addiction. We were told to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him, to make fearless and searching moral inventories. And it didn't feel right to me. He says, "I spent a lifetime cultivating self-acceptance. Now I was being told that the root of my problems was my own moral failings, and my only salvation was to establish a relationship with God." There was something there he was talking about I hadn't thought about, but the first step sounds harmless enough. I'm powerless over alcohol, my life's unmanageable. But step 2 right there should tell you it's religion. It says, "Came to believe a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity." Doesn't say I admitted that I had completely wrecked my life by drinking, and now I had to figure out how to get my control back and how to put my life back together. It says a power greater than myself is what I got to come to believe in order for that to take place. But let's see, I'm going to skip a few more places here because he's just talking about pretty much, the daily regimen of the thing. But he says, "If I have a disease," I looked at step 1 and said to a treatment center counselor, "Why do I have to admit it? Surely I'm not guilty of anything." I wanted to kick up a fuss, but it's amazing how one quickly adopts to a thought system when everyone around you is extolling it. That bears repeating again. It's amazing how quickly you'll fall prey to a thought system when everyone around you is extolling it. People cave to peer pressure in AA all the time. People go in AA and say, "I was a selfish and self-centered person when I got here and I didn't care about nobody but myself." They don't really believe that, but they believe because of the peer pressure they got to say that. They just say that enough times that they stop believing it. The PCA commercials in the 1980s against drugs, which, by the way, was funded by the alcohol industry and the pharmaceutical companies, but they were always talking about peer pressure. They never told you the dangers of peer pressure in religion, But anyway, hopefully my voice won't take a vacation again while I'm doing this, even though it's not up to par, with my sinus stuff. But anyway, I'll keep going. After I asked these questions to a counselor, I was immediately told the more questions you ask, the less this will work. That ought to tell you something's bad wrong right there. There's nothing, whether it's a new skill, whether it's anything in life that you want to learn more about, where I was told that asking questions is the worst thing you could do, that you have to shut up and blindly obey. That's what AA will tell you to do. Stop trying to figure it out. Just be dumb and follow the lead, The experience was very grueling. I filled out more worksheets and it was constantly rubbing my own nose in filth is what I can only equate it to. Describe how you caused others harm. Describe 3 times you broke your own moral codes. Describe what you did here that hurt everybody around you and you didn't care, etc., etc. I finally got to the point where I would shoehorn in anything, hoping the act of confession would keep me clean. That happens a lot in AA too, by the way. You'll say anything just to be accepted by the group. It's more that fucking peer pressure, Despite extensive research, he points out at one point, there's very little reputable evidence to show the 12 steps works better than any other interventions. He mentions a couple of Cochrane reviews. He mentions Lance Dodds. He mentions something called the Orange Book. And a couple of addiction experts he told, and yeah, surprisingly enough, AA doesn't have this magical rate of success. It supersedes all the other treatment center options. I don't know, surprise. But then he asked a question about how did we end up becoming a place in the world today in the 21st century where a quasi-religious treatment is, especially in the U.S., taken over when it comes to treating addiction. He mentions the 12-step method was co-founded by Bill Wilson, who claimed he had a white light experience and a flash of light from God in a hospital. The method that he concocted from the Oxford group proved a convenient remedy because at the time it was a puritanical society that was just emerging from prohibition for the issue of problem drinkers. It's a fundamental Christian organization of which Wilson, a member of, who is a salesman with no medical training, left and created Alcoholics Anonymous, which the AMA at the time labeled a curious combination of organizing propaganda and religious exhortation. That bears repeating again. A curious combination of organizing propaganda and religious exhortation. There is room in AA for people of all shades of belief and non-belief, is what the AA website says. However, during my experience in rehab, I found this is not entirely true. He goes on to talk about the idea of addiction being a disease was introduced in 1960 by a scientist and 12-step pro-adherent, E.M. Jelinek. I don't know that name. That's a name that has never turned up in my studies before. I may have to go and research that. I know about its mass popularity happening due to Marty Mann and the politicians that she was friendly with, both the Republicans and the Democrats, that were more than happy to push her agenda so they could line their pocketbooks with more money from the rehab industry and all the other organizations and institutions that got founded as a result of that. That doesn't surprise me at all. But this Jelinek I've never heard of, so I'll probably have to go look him up. He goes on to talk a little bit more about the sampling bias and how the estimates of the 12-step fellowship success rate are roughly way lower than what they claim, because for every one person that's sitting in a seat in an AA meeting, there's probably about 20 people who came and sat there before you, and the method didn't work. He argues that the program, he's talking about Lance Dodds here, the program of turning your will and lives over to the care of God when you should be seeking actual professional help has caused a great deal of harm to a great many people. The biggest danger for him, he says, is the 12 steps program insistence that relapse is the fault of the individual, which is very, very true. If you go to AA and never drink again, I've said it before, AA, you're supposed to, when you get your medallion, say, it was AA that got you sober, it was God that got you sober, it was the sponsors that got you sober, it was the meetings that got you sober. Can't say you got yourself sober. But if you drink again, it was self-will, it was resentment, it was selfishness, it was the 7 deadly sins. It was instincts gone awry. An instinct can't go awry, by the way. I don't know what the fuck that was even supposed to mean. It's all these other things, but it's ultimately your fault that it's happening to you. And then let's see, I'll go to the next highlighted point. This, I think, is the most important part right here, is near the end. He says, I stayed clean for 13 months, followed the advice, went to 90 meetings in 90 days, went to 5 12-step meetings a week, called a sponsor, went to aftercare, worked in the program and volunteered extra time. And before long, I noticed that, that most of the people that I spent all my time with were AA members, and that only 3 of the 27 people I graduated treatment with were even still around any longer. Then he says that he moved back in with an old friend in London, and he said he had literally closeted himself off into an isolated existence where he was afraid to talk to ordinary people because he was afraid they would convince him he could drink and drug again. He was afraid to engage in normal activity, and he found himself in a very depressive state of mind. He said the undiagnosed eating disorder he had when he was a teenager came roaring back. A lot of other unhealthy habits came roaring back. And that when he got to a point where he was nearly suicidal, he went to talk to his sponsor, and his sponsor said he wasn't doing the steps properly and he needed to go to more meetings. What a surprise. I can't raise my voice or it'll go on vacation again. But yeah, you're doing everything they're telling you to do. You're living in the fucking program, and then you go and say it's not working, and they tell you you're not doing enough meetings. You're not doing it right. That's about simply. I mean, that's par for the course is what I meant to say. He finally admits that right near the end he was suicidal, and that they told him that he didn't trust his higher power, and that's why he was suicidal. So then he says he went on to finally find a therapist and focus on some real issues, and he said that he was in recovery from recovery, that he finally got to real help for the first time in his life, and that he went through a great cognitive dissonance as he tried to offboard all the faulty thinking instilled in him by the 12-step programs. But I love the way he closes the article. He says, I feel that the audacity of diagnosing people with a life-threatening disease that I don't believe exists, and the treatment that they shove in the way of people stood in the way of a lot of patients, and myself included, finding care that suited me. If I'd been provided with genuine choices as a patient, I would have saved myself a lot of time, money, and not had to work through the trauma of rehab and my experiences in the 12 steps. The apparent insistence that the only way that I could live is through the 12 steps, I feel did more damage to me than the drugs and the alcohol combined. And I think that he makes a very salient point there. One of the funny things about this, I didn't get to talk as long as I wanted to and expound on some things because, like I said, my voice keeps going out and it's kind of hoarse now with the seasonal allergy thing, is like I said at the beginning of this thing, every single area of the world, the people that I have encountered online or heard from or talked to, from the UK to Canada to the northeast coast to the southwest to the southeast, they all report the same kind of aberrant behavior in the program everywhere you go. The treatment centers are all the same. It's really unsettling how widespread this problem is, and no telling how many people have articles just like that guy inside of them, and they've never spoken out about it or talked about it to anybody. There's no telling how many people are dead now that went through that same thing as this guy did, but they committed suicide rather than do what he did because they were in such a dark place they saw no way out. I mean, I think it's terribly tragic that someone ended up ending their life before their time because they were given this kind of horseshit treatment as a cure-all for solving their problems. Anyway, I just wanted to put one out this week and let you guys know I'm still alive and kicking. And let me know in the comments what your experiences are with these rehab counselors and all this, you're doing it wrong if you're suicidal kind of thing. Anyway, until next time.